residents are furious over the local government's response. You see, typically, when there's a fire, you use water to put it out. But Maui's Department of Land and Natural Resources delayed the release of water to landowners to help protect their property from the wildfire. In fact, they even disputed the release of water for hours after the West Maui Land Company made a request to release it. Maui survivors are even telling reporters they had to grab water out of their toilets to fend off the flames.
I was grabbing water out of the toilet, I was grabbing water out of my Brita filter in the refrigerator. It's a kind of disconcerting feeling when the fire guys show up and they don't have water.
According to the Deputy Director of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Kaleo Manuel, water isn't a tool.
We've become used to looking at water as like something which we use and not necessarily something that we revere. But that's totally different in this Western capitalistic kind of economy that we live in. It's very extractive, individualistic approaches. Let water connect us and not divide us. Like we can share it, but it requires true conversations about equity.
Last time I checked, water puts out fires. Progressive mumbo jumbo doesn't. Water wasn't the only issue during the wildfires that swept through West Maui. Residents had no idea a fire was coming until they stepped outside their homes and saw the flames on their doorsteps.
I did not receive a warning until I was already getting in my truck to get out of there. Not a single one of my roommates got a warning at all. We got, the notice we had was just screaming from the streets.
Many took to social media, begging for answers as to why the local government refused to sound the alarm that a wildfire was rapidly approaching. But the state officials say no regrets.
Do you regret not sounding the sirens?
I do not. The sirens, as I mentioned earlier, is used primarily for tsunamis.
Officials neglected their duties to protect the people they claimed to represent. They had other priorities. Just like in 2019, when Hawaiian Electric vowed to invest in fire-resistant technology, and instead they invested nearly $85 million in climate change policies, like divesting from oil and investing in renewables. Now that same company is under heavy scrutiny over indication that its power lines may have ignited the wildfires that has now taken over 100 lives. And the people of the once beautiful town of Lahaina, many of them are left to fend for themselves and their neighbors with very little answers and a whole lot of miscommunication. And now they have to fight off vulture capitalists from tricking people into buying their property.
Some of the things that's already been happening is realtors are calling families who lost everything, offering them to buy their property and their home for pennies on the dollar, just pennies on the dollar. So it's pretty offensive to us that people won't even give us the time to grieve properly.
Greedy vulture capitalists aren't the only ones eyeing Lahaina property. Vulture bureaucrats are peeking around the corner too.
Some people may feel the need to relocate, and I'm already thinking about ways for the state to acquire that land so that we can put it into workforce housing, to put it back into families, or to make it open spaces in perpetuity as a memorial to people who were lost.
Mark Morano is the publisher of the Climate Depot and the author of The Great Reset, and he joins us now. Mark, always great to have you on the show. You heard the words of the governor of Hawaii. What does that tell you?
Well, the words come to mind of never let a crisis go to waste. I mean, it's kind of disconcerting to hear the governor talk about the government coming in to buy up lands. He later clarified that to say that they were going to just use the government to protect it from, equity asset purchases. The whole scenario here of it's a comedy of woke eras from beginning to end. The idea that you can't get water released to put out fire because you have to have a conversation about equity first. The idea that you can't focus on making cables safer because Hawaii was the first state of the entire United States to declare itself carbon neutral or net zero by 2045 as they're patting themselves on the back, and the grid operators are worried about the green energy instead of shoring up the energy which they've been multiple times warned about that needed to be shored up to fight wildfires, the land management issues, all of these areas. And yet the Washington Post, Rachel, will still come out and say climate came for Maui and it's coming for you next. I mean, they're still doing this climate boogeyman as the cause of this and not the gross mismanagement from A to Z here.
So some reporters on the ground from ABC saw the situation and saw that there were just some really obvious errors made by government officials who should have known better. And they had a headline that basically stated that. It says, why climate
Yes.
change can't be blamed entirely for the Maui wildfires. Because, of course, we know as soon as there's a wildfire, the climate people come in and say that, you know, it's all green, you know, global warming. But they saw what happened. They were on the ground. They put that out. And then what happened after they put up that headline in that story?
First of all, it was a fantastic story coming from ABC News. They quoted the governor saying this was a fire hurricane that caused this. And then ABC News says the obvious. There's no such thing as a fire hurricane. It was like a mic drop. This outraged the climate activists so much. Professors, climate activists, they were using F-bombs on Twitter, going after ABC News. They had to take out climate change wasn't responsible, add the word entirely, completely back off the major elements of the story because the science police came in and said, you can't go with that narrative. It was the corporate media bowing to the Green New Deal activists, and it was an amazing sight to see because ABC News actually did real climate journalism for a change and then quickly had paid dearly for it.
Yeah, this is how Big Green gets quote-unquote consensus. They bully everyone, threaten them with all kinds of things. Are you afraid of this being used as a climate emergency, a climate lockdown? I know you've been warning about that happening,
Yes.
you know, in the very near future.
I mean, we already have the Green New Deal Network using the Hawaiian fires in Maui to urge Joe Biden to declare a national climate emergency. That would give him, according to Center for Biological Diversity, 130 new executive powers a la COVID, where they could literally bypass democracy once again. That is the end goal. They're weaponizing every single weather event, and they're not taking responsibility to prevent something like this in the future. Instead, it's the boogeyman of climate, and we need more mandates, and we need more emergency powers. And if Joe Biden gets this, we are looking at a very restrictive culture.
Well, Marc Morano, you're always raising the flags, warning us of what's to come. I'm afraid you're right on this one.